Hey guys, Coach Gaglione here. This is a new edition of our podcast. I'm not sure if this will be a series or a standalone episode, depending on how long I blabber for, but today I want to talk about calling an audible. So especially with the kind of the Super Bowl kind of coming up and stuff, I'm sure sometimes you see when the quarterback gets to the line, sometimes they may see an opening, sometimes they may just see a weird formation in the defense, and they just got to switch gears. So this could, sometimes calling an audible can be a good thing. And sometimes calling an audible is a way to kind of play, kind of a little more conservative as well. So it could kind of happen in both cases. We're going to focus a little bit more on, in the case of like kind of when things go wrong, like kind of what to do and how to kind of combat those things. But that being said, sometimes, I like to use the kind of expression, you kind of cook while the skillet is hot or cook while the iron is hot. And there are certainly times where calling an audible and kind of increasing your loads can be, warranted as well, as long as it kind of fits the overall scheme of the program. I think when you're looking to modify program and kind of a big buzzword, not just in powerlifting, but kind of in the fitness industry for, as of maybe the last couple of years is kind of the term of auto-regulation. And auto-regulation is just basically a concept that you're going to either up or down regulate your training, whether that be your volume, whether that be intensity, and potentially even it could be your frequency as well. But the idea of auto-regulation is going to allow you to maximize your progress for the long term. So for example, you may have something like 5 sets of 5 at 75% in your plan for a given day. Let's say, for example, maybe you're doing squatting, and then maybe for that particular day you're feeling a little worn down. So a way that you can kind of down-regulate that workout, you can obviously chop off a set. You can decrease the intensity. You can decrease the weight on the bar, the actual load on the bar, and that's all. And in either case, it's going to allow for a drop in overall workload and overall training volume, whether you're looking at the set or the actual intensity of the exercise. You can also make a really big, you can do a lateral or a vertical shift, depending on if it's an injury-related thing or an illness-related thing, where you modify the actual exercise variation, or maybe you kind of change up the workout completely. So what I would consider more of like a horizontal shift would be something like switching, let's say maybe your shoulder, and we can give it more specific examples, but let's say like your shoulder's bugging you. Maybe a straight bar squat is planned, maybe a low bar squat is planned, so maybe you switch from low bar to high bar that day, or maybe you switch from a low bar squat to a safety squat bar squat that day. That would be more of what I would consider like kind of more of a horizontal move, so it's still like kind of in the same kind of movement category, but not necessarily like really regressing the exercise too much. More of a vertical shift could be like going from what I would consider doing like a barbell squat to something like a belt squat, a goblet squat, or like a lunge, where you're kind of regressing the actual progression of the exercise and making it an easier kind of variation on the body. And a really drastic kind of shift could be like just maybe not doing lower body altogether. So these are some different instances where kind of auto-regulation can come into play. And on the flip side, like I mentioned before, maybe you're feeling really good, so maybe you up the intensity a little bit, maybe you increase the volume a little bit, maybe you add a set, maybe you add a rep, maybe you keep the intensity the same, but you kind of increase, like I said, the volume a little bit as well. So for going on kind of with the theme of kind of the topic today, we're going to kind of focus a little bit more on kind of like what to do when kind of things kind of go wrong. I think it's really important that we don't just see training as an isolated event. What you kind of have done up until that point, so what you've done in the past and what you're going to do in the future, is all going to also affect your decision making. We talked about this concept before, but there's like a concept of training flexibility. Let's say you have a competition date over here, and let's say this is like your off season where you don't have any competition planned, or you don't have any competition in the near future. So like let's say your meet is more like 20 weeks or more out. There's going to be this concept of training flexibility. As you get closer to the contest, when you're 10, 8, 6, especially in that 4 to 6 week window, And when you're under 4 weeks, it's very, very important that there's very little training flexibility. So it's your adherence to the program, especially during a peaking phase, is going to be pretty critical. If you miss a workout or if you miss, a weight, the consequences for getting prepared for the meet is going to be pretty high because you're not going to necessarily you don't really have as much wiggle room. You just don't have as much time to kind of correct. If there was an issue, if there was, hopefully not, but let's say there was an injury or something like that. Like for example, if you had some sort of like really large injury, like a week out from the meet, it's pretty safe to say that you're probably not going to be able to compete, or you're at best, you're not going to have a great performance. But if you had something kind of go wrong like that, 20, 30, 40 weeks out from a meet, it's really not a huge consequence, and you have plenty of time to kind of correct it. So understanding the concept of training flexibility is really important when you're looking to call an audible. Your flexibility of training is going to be a lot thinner. Now, that being said, can you still call an audible during a peaking cycle? Of course, and you absolutely should. But the decisions that you make are going to be a lot less drastic, and you're not going to go. So during a peaking phase, horizontal shifts are probably going to be more warranted versus a vertical shift. So, for example, is it going to be like a huge issue if you go from like a high bar squat to a low bar squat, or vice versa? Probably not. But completely missing a session, let's say like 2 weeks out from a meet, and only belt squatting versus barbell squatting, that might be too drastic of a change, and that might, taking that workout out might not allow you to get ready for the competition or be as fully prepared. Are there some instances where that still could happen? Of course. But just realize that there's going to be a higher consequence the larger your changes. If you have a drastic adjustment in your volume, a drastic adjustment in your intensity. So for example, if you're supposed to work up to, let's say you're a couple weeks out from meet, you're supposed to work up to a projected opener, or you're supposed to work up to a projected second. Maybe you're doing singles somewhere in like the 90 to 95% range. If you're only able, let's say you weren't feeling that good that day and you only worked up to like 70%, that's too drastic of a change. Now, if you were supposed to work within 90 to 95% and maybe did a couple of singles at 90%, that's like a smaller change, and that could potentially be warranted. But just realize that the closer you are to a contest, those changes need to be a lot smaller. So the reason kind of like I want to talk about this topic was I have a meet coming up in April, and I've been kind of on a roll, especially with my lower body training. I've been feeling really good. My diet's been going awesome. I've been getting leaner. I've been kind of, I lost all of the weight that I gained during the holidays. So I just been feeling really good, feeling really confident, and I had I mentioned before in a previous Guidance Goals update in my vlog, I got really sick for the first time in a long time. I could not train that day at all. I really wanted to mentally. I had such bad body aches from vomiting, being dehydrated, having potentially some hypothermia because I had to fix a flat tire. It was really cold in New York. A lot of bad things happened all at once, and I had to kind of fix those things. And even at the time of this taping, I'm still kind of not 100%, so I need to focus on getting healthy. Now, that being said, I'm still pretty far out from my contest, so it's really not a big deal. But it still wasn't kind of more of a mental it was a mental kind of annoying kind of factor, just because I couldn't stick with the plan. So I think it's important that, again, this is also really helpful for me to kind of unpack this information for you guys. Since I am far out from a meet, it's really not a big deal that I missed one workout, and the workout that I missed was more of an accessory workout. I was planning on doing some heavier singles in my suit for deadlifts, and I was planning on getting on my bench shirt this week. I did not do either. Not a huge deal. I'm using this time just to kind of recover and get back on track with my training, and I'll just have to wait a couple of weeks to kind of get back in my equipment. Not a huge deal, but it's just something to kind of consider. I could have been really stubborn, but understanding the concept of training flexibility really helped me understand that it's really not a big deal if I just go a little bit lighter. So I ended up just omitting my equipped work this week, and I just ended up doing my planned accessory work and supplemental exercises for the week. So I omitted one full day of training, So that kind of adjusted so one full accessory day. And basically, for those that don't know, I typically will do all my barbell movements on one day, and then usually the following day, or maybe sometimes following later in the actual day itself, or the next day, I will do my accessory work. So that would be like my isolation exercises and core movements and things like that. So actual abdominal movements, and just more of my single joint type stuff. So I had to eliminate that day completely, so I didn't do any of my lower body accessory work this week. I cut down on my intensity, and I cut down on my volume a little bit on my other exercises. I mentioned before I omitted my primary exercise for my bench, so I did not do any shirted bench this week, and I eliminated my primary deadlift exercise, eliminated my sumo deadlift in a suit workout for this week as well. So those are pretty drastic changes. I don't really recommend that you kind of omit workouts completely. Like I mentioned before, this was a situation where I was really sick and I literally could not do much of anything. I was literally in the fetal position for several hours this past Monday when I taped this video, at the time of the taping of this video. So for that's kind of like worst case scenarios, is kind of missing completely. But sometimes don't be afraid to take a day off. This is one of the situations where it's kind of easier said than done. This is hard to kind of practice what you preach, but like missing a day, sometimes moving a day around is like not the end of the world. One of the benefits of training with a little bit of lower frequency, if you only train 2, 3, or 4 days a week, if you miss a day, since there are 7 days in a week, it's a little bit easier to make up that workout and just kind of push your workouts back, which is something I'm going to have to kind of play with moving forward. For people that train with a little higher frequencies, people that train 5, 6, or even some of the crazy people out there that train 7 days a week, if you miss a workout or if you miss a day, it's really hard to you really don't have the opportunity to make it up unless you kind of do like a double session or something like that. And then especially if you're doing total body workouts, it gets really tricky to kind of make things up. So if you do miss a workout, you could certainly kind of add in more volume or kind of add it in later in the week, because at the end of the day, you need to look at training as a whole. But since I do have heavy workouts coming up within 2 weeks, again, you need to not just think about what's happening on this day as a whole, but what's to come. And if I know that if I was not healthy and feeling better for the coming weeks, that's going to throw off my training even more. So I elected to just kind of rest and kind of take some exercises out. And those were some of the audibles that I kind of called this week. So I just think it's really important that we kind of understand. We don't just look at what's going to happen today, but how is this going to affect me moving forward. I could have been really stubborn and just kind of pushed through the training, but that could have also had a cascade effect and affected next week's workout, which in turn would affect next week's workout, and I could have been kind of playing catch up with my recovery, moving into the more important phases of the training cycle. So again, when you're looking to call an audible, I think it's really important to understand what did you do up until this point, what's the goal of the day, and how is that modifying this workout. If I modify this workout, how is that going to affect me moving forward? So later, so what we're going to do is continue the conversation a little bit, and we're going to give you more specific examples when you're kind of dealing with an actual kind of injury. We're going to talk about some different lateral and so we're going to talk about horizontal and vertical shifts that you can make for specific exercises based on kind of bumps and bruises and maybe injuries that you're dealing with. So in the case of this podcast today, this is more like general fatigue and general sickness and just feeling run down. So now we're actually going to talk about if you're like maybe your elbows are hurting or your shoulders are hurting. We're going to talk about some different audibles that kind of be warranted. So the first thing I would look at before modifying any exercise variation is adjusting the volume, the intensity, and the frequency slightly. So I kind of mentioned it with myself. I adjusted the frequency a little bit by eliminating the workout completely. I adjusted some of the volume intensity. I eliminated kind of my real heavy lifts of the day for my squat and bench workout. So I eliminated some intensity there. And obviously eliminated some volume as well because I eliminated some exercises. And that's kind of some of the audibles I made. So we're going to talk about some more how to use variation when calling an audible for your program and some ways that would kind of warrant that. So I hope this kind of video helped you guys when you're and I think if you are working with a coach, it's kind of important to have these conversations with him or her. Obviously, because at the end of the day, especially if you're working with somebody online, A lot of times you can't make these decisions on the fly. Your coach can't make these decisions on the fly with you. So it's important that you kind of understand when you should kind of make these changes. And then if you do make changes to your program, make sure you communicate them to your coach and also explain why you did that, how you were feeling. Also talk about your nutrition, your hydration, your sleep, and stress levels leading up to that event. Because sometimes you can kind of backtrack and realize, I wasn't really hydrated, I wasn't sleeping as much, or I had a really stressful day at work, or I had a really stressful event with my spouse or significant other. All these things can be a factor in how your recovery is going to be and what your readiness is going to be for that particular day. So, in short, don't be afraid to call an audible when needed. If you see the defense has shifted around, or maybe you see an opening and maybe you want to push a little bit more, that's totally fine too. I'm going to give you some more tips on how to use variation to call audibles if you're dealing with bumps and bruises in later episodes. If this video helped you, please share it. Thank you guys for watching. And you guys remember, don't be afraid. This is a quote from Joe DeFranco. Write your workouts in pencil, not pen. Don't be afraid to adjust as needed. That's part of the long-term training process. We all do it. Thank you guys for watching. Check out the links below. Please subscribe. And until next time, guys, stay strong, and we'll see you soon.